Okay, so this is part two of the peripheral nervous system lecture. Okay, and now we're going to talk about the spinal nerves. So a spinal nerve is short and it divides into the following two mixed nerves. Both carry both somatic and sensory information. So on the posterior ramus, this will travel to the posterior side of the body. And on the anterior ramus, this will travel to the anterior side of the body or to the upper and lower limbs. So all spinal nerves are like mixed nerves, unlike the cranial nerves, which you could have mixed sensory or motor. So if we're looking here, okay, here's your spinal nerves, okay, and again, the anterior side and posterior side. And on the posterior side, you're going to have the dorsal root ganglion. Okay, you see here, you can see this little bump right here. This is going to be your afferent nerve. Okay, so the dorsal root on the posterior side here is going to be your sensory nerve. And this is an afferent nerve fiber, AFF, which means it's going towards the central nervous system. On the anterior side, or the ventral root here, this is going to be the motor nerve. So this is coming from the central nervous system going to the periphery. Ventral is going to be on the anterior side here. Okay, and again, this is your motor. And this is referred to as EFF, efferent nerve. Okay, so afferent is going towards the central nervous system. And you can always tell that this is the afferent one because it has this little ganglion, which is like a little bump. And the efferent, EFF, is always going to be your motor going away from the central nervous system. And you're going to have a pair on either side of coming off the spinal cord here. So there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. You have 8 pairs of cervical nerves, 12 pairs of thoracic, 5 lumbar and sacral nerves, and 1 pair of coccygeal nerves. Okay. And what's going to happen is these nerves are going to form plexuses. Plexuses are groupings of nerves. And there's 4 main plexuses that we'll talk about: the cervical, brachial, lumbar, and sacral plexuses. As far as the thoracic nerves are concerned, T1 through T12, each thoracic nerve will supply a rib. You have 12 pairs of ribs. So each thoracic nerve will supply a rib and the muscles, skin associated with those ribs. Let's talk about the first one, the cervical plexus. You know, the right and left cervical plexuses are found deep in the neck, lateral to the 1st through 4th cervical vertebrae. The plexus consists of the anterior rami of C1 through C5, and a small contribution from the hypoglossal nerve, which was cranial nerve 12. Each nerve in plexus has cutaneous branches that will innervate the skin of the neck and sections of the head, chest, and shoulders. Most branches of these nerves innervate specific muscles in the neck. And one of the most important nerves out of this plexus is the phrenic nerve, which is a major motor branch of C4 with contributions from C3 and C5. 3, 4, 5 to stay alive. And the reason why we say that is because the phrenic nerve innervates the diaphragm, which is your primary breathing muscle. Without the diaphragm, you cannot breathe. Okay. Now, you don't need to know all 31 pairs of spinal nerves individually. You do need to know the plexuses and what the plexuses will innervate, and any major nerves that come out of the plexus. So in this case, the phrenic nerve. And here we can see the cervical plexus, again, from C1 through C5 here. Okay. And one of the major nerves that I want to highlight is the phrenic nerve. Okay. And then you also have some other smaller nerves coming off of here. But again, the one I'm highlighting here is the phrenic nerve, which innervates the diaphragm. The brachial plexus, you have the right and left brachial plexuses. This is lateral to the 5th cervical through the 1st thoracic vertebrae. Provides motor and sensory innervation to the upper limbs and includes nerve roots from C1 through T1. The brachial plexus begins with the formation of a large nerve trunks, and you have C5 and C6 will typically unite to form the superior trunk. C7 usually forms the middle trunk, and C8 through T1 will unite to form the inferior trunk. And here you can see the brachial plexuses, okay, with our superior, middle, and inferior trunks. And then you can see, in addition, the lateral, medial, and posterior cords, which will either supply the anterior or posterior division of the spinal cord. I'm sorry, anterior, posterior divisions of the body, sides of the body. Now, there are 5 major nerves that come out of the brachial plexus. You have the axillary nerve. This is a branch of the posterior cord, and it serves structures near the axilla, including the deltoid and teres minor muscles, and skin over the deltoid region. The radial nerve innervates the triceps brachii muscle and most of the external muscles in the forearm. Also innervates the skin over the posterior 2nd digit, 3rd digit, and lateral half of the 4th digit. The musculocutaneous nerve, this innervates the anterior arm of the muscles, including the biceps brachii and the skin covering the lateral arm. The median nerve innervates the wrist and the digital flexors. Some muscles of the hand and skin over the anterior thumb, 2nd, 3rd digits, and the lateral half of the 4th digit. And then finally, the ulnar nerve innervates the flexor muscles in the forearm, the ones that are not mediated by the median nerve. Most intrinsic hand muscles, so most of the muscles that move your hand, and skin of the 5th digit and the medial side of the 4th digit. The thoracic spinal nerves do not form a plexus, except for T1 can participate a little. And what's going to happen is the posterior ramus is going to innervate the back muscles, the deep back muscles, and each anterior ramus will travel between 2 ribs as an intercostal nerve and innervate the ribs. And like I said, you have 12 thoracic nerves and you have 12 pairs of ribs. The lumbar plexus, the left and right lumbar plexuses are derived from the anterior rami of L1 through L5, anterior to the vertebrae, embedded deep within the psoas muscle. It branches to innervate the pelvic structures and lower extremities after splitting into 2 divisions. And again, you're looking L1 through L5 of the spinal nerves here. The lumbar plexus divisions, you have the obturator nerve. This is the anterior division's member. It enters the thigh from the pelvis via the obturator foramen. You'll see the structure when we get to the skeleton. And it branches of the nerve will innervate the adductor muscles, which will move the thigh towards the midline of the body, the hip joint, and the skin over the medial aspect of the thigh. The lumbar plexus, continuing with the lumbar plexus, we have the femoral nerve. This travels from the psoas muscle through the pelvis and under the inguinal ligament to enter the thigh where it innervates. Anterior thigh muscles, the anterior medial thigh and leg. So sort of the front of the thigh, front and medial portion of the thigh and the leg, as well as the knee joint. The sacral plexus, the right and left sacral plexuses are formed from the anterior rami of spinal nerves L4 through S4. And nerve branches will innervate structures of the pelvis, the gluteal region, which is the buttocks region, and much of the lower extremities. Each plexus is divided into anterior and posterior divisions. When we look at the sacral plexus division, we have the sciatic nerve. This is the longest and largest nerve in the body. It will contain axons from both anterior and posterior divisions of the sacral plexus. It travels through the greater sciatic notch in the pelvis to the thigh, passing between the greater trochanter and the ischial tuberosity. It will also innervate the hip joint in the posterior thigh before it divides into the tibial and common fibular nerves. The tibial nerve, this is the larger branch of the sciatic nerve. This is going to innervate parts of the knee and ankle joints, as well as plantar flexor muscles, such as the gastrocnemius. Plantar flexor muscles will allow you to stand on your tippy toes. The smaller common fibular nerve, or also called sometimes in some books, the common peroneal nerve, is made up of axons from the posterior division of the sacral plexus. This particular nerve is divided into superficial and deep branches, where the superficial branch will serve the lateral leg and the dorsum of the foot. So the lateral leg is going to be the side of your leg, okay? And the deep branches will supply the ankle dorsal flexors and two muscles of the dorsum on the foot. So here you can see in general where various plexuses will innervate, sort of colored out in tone here. And you can even see the major nerves within each plexus and where they are actually innervating. Okay, so this is actually a pretty nice figure that sort of shows that distribution. So this is for sensory information. So this is collecting sensory information, and then this is for motor. This is going to innervate all the muscles in the various colors here. So again, this is looking at the sensory side. So these would be your afferent neurons going back to the CNS. These would be the efferent neurons coming from the CNS. Now, with your spinal nerves, we have what's referred to as dermatomes, and another thing referred to as referred pain. Referred pain is a phenomenon where pain originates in an organ, is perceived as a cutaneous pain. This occurs because many spinal nerves carry both somatic and visceral neurons, somatic being skeletal muscle or surfaces, and visceral being internal organs. And because these nerves are so close to each other, visceral sensations can travel along the same pathways as do the somatic sensations. Its referred pain is generally located along the dermatome for a particular nerve. So if you sort of look here, and one of the signs, for example, for a heart attack is, left upper quadrant here, but also radiating down the left arm, okay, especially down the pinky here. And then you can see various other internal organs where the referred pain would sort of be felt. Okay. Now, part of the autonomic nervous system, which is your part of the peripheral nervous system that is going to regulate various aspects of the body. But with the autonomic nervous system, this is your unconscious control, okay? And there's two divisions. You have sympathetic division and parasympathetic division. And you end up with what's called dual innervation. All visceral organs are served by both divisions, but cause opposite effects. And it's a dynamic antagonism between the two visions will maintain homeostasis. So what that means is you get this constant back and forth between the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. So the role of parasympathetic division is to promote maintenance activities and conserve body energy. It directs digestion, diuresis, and defecation as in-person relaxing and reading after a meal, as a person that is relaxing and reading after a meal. Blood pressure, heart rate, and respiratory rates are low. GI tract activity is high. Pupils are contracted. Lenses are accommodated for close vision. With the sympathetic division, this is going to mobilize the body during activity or your fight or flight response. This includes activities such as exercise, excitement, emergency, and embarrassment. Increased heart rate, dry mouth, cold, sweaty skin, dilated pupils are very common with the sympathetic division. During vigorous physical activity. This will shunt blood towards the skeletal muscles and the heart to meet demand. It will dilate the bronchioles to be able to bring in more air. It will ultimately bring in more oxygen. And it will also to release glucose. Okay. And then, here's a table from your book that really just sort of summarizes some of the major differences between the parasympathetic and sympathetic divisions of the nervous system. Make sure that you do take some time to sort of read through this and understand the true differences between these two systems. And then I also like to show this where you can see the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions and sort of the activity that's occurring. And you could see the autonomic nervous system is really going to control things like the eye, the skin, salivary glands, lungs, heart, stomach, pancreas, liver, gallbladder, adrenal, bladder, genitals. So most of your internal organs are being regulated by this autonomic nervous system, both on the parasympathetic and sympathetic side. Okay. I believe that wraps up this chapter. Okay.